And Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. And he went down to the port of Joppa where he found a ship. It was leaving for Tarshish. So to say that I'm going to go to Tarshish would be like going to Timbuktu. Like, not only am I not going east, I am so far going west, the other direction. Hey, it's Rachelle and Carder. Thank you for joining us on the Anything But Quiet Time podcast for another episode of What Are They Thinking?
Actually, that's a great segue to what I have to ask.
What were you thinking?
I had a reminder go off today.
Oh.
It's been 1 year.
If you don't know anything about Carter, you should know that he's really good at keeping track of things, but he does it through his phone. So, like, if your phone... If you were one of those videos that goes viral where the phone goes, into the elephant
I'm
pit,
gone.
It's done.
I'm gone. I won't show up to anything anymore.
You have to have that.
I won't even know where I work, honestly. So I had a reminder go off today. It's the 1 year anniversary.
Of what?
My wife saying, okay, you were right. You win. And I said, I'm going to mark this day down. And I did. And I'm wondering, should I or should I not remind her of said day?
Now, wait a second. What was it in regards to?
I have no idea. It was something somewhat silly, at least. Let's just throw that out there. It wasn't like, I was me bringing it up here. It was super serious.
Right.
I didn't even write down what it was. I wrote silly argument.
Okay.
And so, but she said, you're right, you win. And I remember saying, I'm marking this day down. And I did. And it's been a year.
Yeah.
Do I bring it up?
Will she somehow twist this around to still make it you're wrong? Is it worth the fight?
I don't know.
Is it worth a fight?
That's what I'm gauging.
You got to gauge where she's at. Now, she's in a playful mood. You could probably get away with it.
Could I win again?
It's either.
I should not go to Vegas. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that right now. This is dangerous territory.
Yeah. You can't count these cards.
Right.
I have no idea, man.
Okay. And another, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
You brought a pirate bag.
This isn't a what were they thinking. It's adorable. Look at, this is let me show you.
I feel like I'm on QVC right now.
Look at the tiny little telescope.
Yeah. This is a Jack Sparrow.
I'm Captain Jack Sparrow, Jim. It's Michael Scott's impression of Jack Sparrow. Captain Jack Sparrow.
You were intently doing something. I said, what are you doing? Well, we were working. And you said, I have to move my money to my pirate wallet.
I did.
And you did.
It's the Black Pearl. Black Pearl wallet. And I thought it'd be fun to bring it today because I'd like to talk about Jonah today.
Okay. Oh, great.
And most of our knowledge from Jonah comes from?
Jonah.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I've been listening to a podcast series lately from Tim Mackey who said, I'm trying to de-vegetize people. Because if you only have the vegetable version in your head, then you probably have missed out on a lot of good stuff. I always think of VeggieTales, though, as a wonderful springboard for kids to absolutely get them intrigued by Bible stories. But there's clearly more.
Yeah. You want to dig a little bit more. Yeah.
But if you're one of those Christians who grew up on that and have never explored further, I think the encouragement is there to go, now, wait. This is actually really not a child's story.
Is this what they were doing? Was this a whole time the VeggieTales saying you start here and then you grow to the meat?
Well, you can only grow if you eat your vegetables.
This is.
Let's not.
It's Inception. I don't know what's happening. Phil Vischer's like, we didn't think any of that.
None
it's
of
just
that.
fun cartoons.
Well, and plus it was easiest to computerize vegetables. They have no arms. So you don't have to worry about shadows and stuff like that. Anyway, but looking into Jonah is what I'm about to do. This is time worthy. What do you have? Should I tease this or?
No, you should just go.
Should I just go?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think last week somebody was confused when I teased something. They said, wait, I thought you were going to talk about this, and you talked about something else, and I was like, oh, well, we should probably just go. Because we did talk about it later, yeah.
Is that when I spoke most of the time and you didn't get to talk?
No, this was, I teased Samaritans, the story of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
I said, that's coming up. And then you got into Daniel, and then they were like, wait, how does Daniel relate? And I'm like, oh, it doesn't. Sorry about that. I know, I probably spoke too quickly.
So this is an Anything But Quiet Time podcast. Did we lead you to believe we were professionals at this?
And she's, I know she may comment on this. I know I'm going to know her name.
Okay.
And so I'm so sorry about that. Genuinely. Better communication.
Better communication.
You talk about Jonah
right
now.
Okay, Jonah chapter 1, verse 1. I licked my finger like I was going to turn a page, and
You did. And if you're watching, you saw it. Yeah.
totally on my phone. Okay. The Lord gave this is the NLT version. I like that version of the Bible. It reads fairly easy, but it's also it's accurate.
If you're new to the translation world, there are varying degrees
Yes.
and there's different thought processes. Some are word for word, some are thought for thought. I believe that's a thought for thought, but it is, I think in my mind, the way I've heard some scholars talk on it, it's kind of the last tier before you get to what's called a paraphrase. The NLT is a true translation. It's just today's language.
It's just today's language, so it's going to be so much easier if you're still in like VeggieTale mode. And I'm going to go ahead and say, apparently I am, because I really like it.
It's great. I think it's a good translation.
But
I will say there's been a couple times I've read it and then gone to ESV or something and gone, that is a little different.
Yeah.
That's I didn't know how much of a difference that was. Not something groundbreaking, but.
I'm glad we kind of broached this subject, because if you want to like take a book like Jonah, which you could absolutely do, and it's only a few chapters, and really take some time with it, maybe not the NLT version, because there are many things to discover and uncover. If you really want to go for word or something like that. If you are reading the Bible, say through a year, and you want to get the meat of something.
Yeah, no, that's good.
You could do that.
Well, if you're doing it, if you're doing a study of something like as short as Jonah, you could read multiple translations for the study.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so yeah.
You could, and you're like, I'm done in this day with all that, Rachelle.
Yeah.
I have an IQ of 199.
Wow, that's
amazing. You clearly are lying, because you wouldn't be listening to us right now if you had an IQ of 199.
That's a good thing. We know if somebody's lying.
That's right.
We would have a good test of that if
they like to mingle with the little people on YouTube.
Ah, yes.
Okay, so the Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. Jonah means dove, and Amittai means faithful. Right there, we are set up with a fun premise. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? Okay, so Jonah is actual prophet. You can read the name Jonah, and it is written out in other places in the Bible. So when you see the book of Jonah and you read this story, it's a narrative of what happens with Jonah. And we always think about the big fish, the whale, which of course the whale like takes up like 3 words. That's not true, but it's a very short piece.
Yeah, right.
Of the entire story, but it's the part that we remember the most. You probably have thought this is a story about obedience. And this is a story about you should go and help those people. Maybe it's even a story about saving people. And I think all of the above is accurate. But I've heard it said that really what you should do when you're reading a book in the Bible, what is the author's intent for this book? And they will give you clues. There's a lot of people who believe that this actually happened to Jonah, that he was swallowed by a fish. And I have no problem with that. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen in scripture that you're like, if Jesus can raise from the dead, and I believe that he can raise from the dead, isn't that a pretty incredible miracle? And I'm fine with that. But then there are others that are like, I don't know if he could part the waters. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But you can raise somebody that was dead, not just one, not just 2. We're going on 3 days dead, right?
Yeah, I think you can't, as a Christian, go, the Old Testament is just some nice stories.
Right.
If you're knowing that the supernatural exists.
Yeah.
But it is good to go, what it literarily, these literary devices, as scholars talk about, that what is it actually meaning? What is the category of language, of writing for any given book?
So Jonah is what category?
Well, I know it was he is in the prophets, right?
He's a prophet
in the Tanakh.
We know that even in the very first verse, because the Lord gave this message to Jonah. The Lord doesn't give messages to people
non-prophets.
a lot. You're a prophet if you get the message of the word of the Lord. So this is a prophet, and there are about 3 categories of scripture, right? We've got prophets, we've got narrative, we've got poetry, I think is one of the subjects, but this, I think it's like, it depends on where you're at. And I think we have to be careful when we kind of point our fingers even at biblical scholars we might not agree with and say, you're totally wrong. This could be a narrative of an event that took place with a prophet, or it could be an SNL sketch that the Bible gives us. This could be a satire. And here's why. First of all, Jonah, his name means dove. When you think of dove, you think of Holy Spirit, you think of peace, you think of whatever it is that you think of. The bird that Noah would end up releasing last and bringing back the fig leaf. Wait, olive branch, sorry. Fig leaf, that's Adam and Eve. Forget that I said that.
Wow.
Anyway, his name means dove, that's peaceful. Jonah was anything but peaceful in this story, okay? Jonah is a man who is never happy with anything in this story, except towards the end when there's this really pretty little tree he's super excited about that grows and gives him shade looking towards the city of Nineveh. Get to that in a second. But also his dad's name means faithful, son of faithfulness. He's the opposite of faithful because the next part where God has given him this message, he's a prophet. So he's like, I know it's you, Lord. He says, get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Well, the great city of Nineveh is not a great city. It could mean like big or terrible or whatever, but it's not a great city. Nineveh is this place, very real place, where people were the worst. Imagine, Carter, tomorrow God says, okay, first of all, I'm going to give you a message from me. You've been donned prophet. He's knighted you now. And I want you to go into the middle of the worst Islamic terrorist group you can possibly imagine, extreme, and I want you to give him this message. That's kind of like that. So understandably, Jonah is not going to feel like a dove in the moment, more like a chicken or a turkey is like it comes to me. It's like,
not going to do that, yeah.
Not doing that. And announce my judgment against the city of Nineveh because I've seen how wicked its people are. We've seen stone carvings in archaeology. It's been unearthed. They have, record-wise, the pictures of what they've done to people. They were very ingenious, apparently very good strategists when it came to war. I guess people still study their strategies today, which is interesting.
It is a idea that we have to get past, that because we've progressed and we've lived life and we do know more historically than they did.
Yeah.
But people that lived back in the day weren't dumb.
And this would be the Assyrians. They were not dumb.
Right.
They would eventually even take over the top half of Israel, when it divided into Israel and Judah. The Assyrians were also, I believe they're the ones who created that like ramp, that wheeled cart ramp that you could go up against the city walls and then just go up to capture. Like they were kind of amazing, but they also they have pictured carvings of knives in their hands where they are skinning alive people. So they were brutal. They were very smart, but they were brutal. And so, Jonah, go and visit this city. Just like, it's great. Let's do it. But earlier today, you and I were talking with one of our friends, an engineer where we work, and he shared, he was an officer was he an officer? It doesn't matter. He was in the Navy. Okay, seen a lot of country in this world, gone a lot more places than me, certainly. And one of the places in Baghdad, he said, I remember an area that is no longer there because there's no more people that are alive there. They're all gone. And he said, but in that area, while there were still people, there was this little old lady, and she would openly walk through the very extreme streets of her city with a rosary, praying over people, which was, this is totally against that area's belief system.
Yeah.
It's extreme Islam terrorist groups in the area, I'm sure, because if you're scared to walk down the street with a rosary, you would be. And even for those who would maybe attribute their lifestyle as more of a peaceful Islamic faith culture, it would still, that's a no-no. That's what are you doing? So there are incredible people in this world still that are openly faith walkers. And God is asking Jonah to do what he's only asked all of his kids to do, to trust him, to walk out in front of a giant with a stone and slay him, to put the staff in the water and the waters are going to part, just obey. But that's not what he does. He gets, he goes the complete opposite direction. This is the third verse in. So to me, I'm already laughing because it is funny when you read this. It's like, please announce my judgment against it and how wicked its people are. And you could almost see this as a play. Nope, I don't think so. And Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. And he went down to the port of Joppa where he found a ship. It was leaving for Tarshish. Now, Tarshish is a place that would be like in Spain. Spain is the furthest out in the known world at this point. Like it's the ends of the earth. So to say that I'm going to go to Tarshish would be like going to Timbuktu. This is like, not only am I not going east, I am so far going west, the other direction. And he bought a ticket. He went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish, which I know that I am guilty of being the person who professes Jesus. I'm a Christian, and I have done the opposite of what I know to do. I've done that. And we've got this almost weird idea, as long as we're a Christian and maybe the Holy Spirit calls us out on stuff as we're in church or meeting with friends or anything throughout the day, that he can bring something to mind and say, this is not for you. You should not be doing this. And I can just slough it off. Well, I know I shouldn't really, but... And maybe it's because I know the salvation of Christ and the grace that is there and that he will forgive me. But that's an asinine way to live.
Yeah, that's true.
As a follower of Christ. This is wrong. I've told you it's wrong. You're still going to do it. So he knows who he's dealing with. This is Yahweh. This is the Lord. This is the God whose name the Jewish people were even scared to say out loud, because they had tremendous fear of the Lord, and he's going the opposite way. So there's this, all this time as a giant storm was happening. We know the story. Maybe you've heard the story. Even if you're not a believer in Christ, you probably have heard Jonah and the whale. But this violent storm comes over, and it's just going to break the ship apart. And fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shout to their gods for help. And they are throwing the cargo overboard, they're lightening the ship, and they are showing a type of faith act that we don't even see with Jonah because he's asleep, which we kind of shared this on our radio show the other day. You're driving along a stretch of land from here to there, and there are times where you get there, you're like, I don't even remember the last 3 lights I just drove through.
It's a form of hypnosis, actually, yeah.
Right? And you've had that happen. I've had that happen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I hope they were green. I don't know. I went through all the lights.
They must have been green, though.
Yeah, surely.
It's almost like a muscle memory thing.
Yeah, it really is, yeah.
Your brain is miraculous in that you can do several things at once, and sometimes successfully. And Jonah was asleep at the wheel, if you will, with his faith. He just, I don't know, he's just moseying along, and he's blocking things out, and he's not listening on purpose. He's just not listening. And so he's asleep. He's asleep down below. And the captain is like, dude, how can you sleep? Get up, pray to your God. We've tried ours. You pray to your God. Maybe he'll pay attention. Maybe he'll spare our lives. We are willing to try anything. We believe that there is something greater than us working here. So we know that we got to get outside of our own depth and pray. And so this man who has the false faith is encouraging the one who has the real faith, supposedly. And then the crew casts lots, which is, just if you've ever seen the game, I don't know. There's nothing even really that compares today, unless you all have done that before. You have all the sticks in your hand and you have to choose a stick. And all right, so they cast lots. And they see that it's Jonah, that this is the one where the fault is lying. And why has this awful storm come down on us, they demanded. Who are you? What is your line of work? And what country are you from? What's your nationality? And he goes, I am a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land.
Well, we're in the sea.
We're in the sea. He made the sea. And you made him mad? Yeah. Sailors are terrified when they heard this, for he had already told them that he was running away from his God. Fantastic. This is great. And by great, I'm being sarcastic. This is the worst.
Yeah.
The worst. So why did you do it? They groaned. And since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked him, what should we do? You're the only one who knows what you did. What should we do? And there's a couple ways you could look at what Jonah says next. There's the one where he says, you should throw me into the sea because it'll become calm again when you do that. And I know that this terrible storm is my fault. He's now come to a place of recognition that I've screwed up. And here we are in this mess. And I thought I could run. So just do what you got to do. Or it would be better for me to drown in this sea. So I'm going to tell these guys, just throw me in the sea, than go into the worst part of the world there is right now and say anything that could help redeem their situation. This is not what I want to do. So there's a couple of different schools of thought on that. But the sailors, they weren't good with that. They're like, look, if the Lord is able to do this stuff and he's Lord of the sea, and we throw his guy in the water, how's that going to look? So, but it gets to be too much. And they're like, okay, Jonah's God, Lord. Jonah's God, Lord, they plead. Don't make us die for this man's sin. Don't hold us responsible for his death, Lord. And they're trying to do actually a very righteous thing. They don't want to murder somebody. Mm-hmm. But you sent this storm upon him. Please just remember that we didn't really do this. And they pick up Jonah and they throw him in the raging sea, and the storm stops like boom. And I've seen that a few times in Houston where it's like all of a sudden it just started raining. You didn't even see clouds. Where did that come from? And then it just gone. The sun comes right back out. And so I have a little bit of an idea what that would be like, except surrounded by waves on all sides and thinking like Titanic thoughts. That would be very scary. And then it's done. And so in that moment, they're so awestruck by this God, which I know the other gods that they serve have never done anything miraculous because they're false.
Right. Yeah.
This one's clearly real, and they sacrifice, right? It says that they offer a sacrifice and vow to serve him. To offer a sacrifice, generally, I believe they would be on land. But the first thing they do when they make port, we're going to sacrifice to this God because this is for realsies. Now, the Lord had arranged for a great fish to swallow Jonah. Okay, we got the great fish ready to go, Gabriel. Ready to go, and action. Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. There is a lot of imagery that prophets like Hosea and Jeremiah use, talking about the swallowing up of God's people in their sin. If this was meant to be a satire, if it was meant to be like when we watch SNL, whether you like it or not, politically, wherever we're at in the government, whether it's a Democrat or Republican in the president's seat, they're going to have fun at that person's expense. And whether we actually have voted for that guy that they're making fun of, we might even find some of the isms that they're doing and go, oh, I can see that. That's pretty funny. All of the people in this play, if it's meant to be a satire, we would be kind of giggling along with it, be like, yeah, that is funny. That's so Jonah. Oh my word, I've met him. Yeah, he's kind of a grouch, you know? Oh my word. And he got swallowed up by the whale. Oh, that's just like what it was saying in the Bible earlier. You know, the prophets were well read. Like Daniel, we had mentioned this a couple episodes ago, shares his dream in Daniel 7, and some of the imagery there is something that was very similar to I'd read in Hosea. Mm-hmm. He would have read Hosea. So they were at different parts in the timeline of Israel, and I found that fascinating. But here's Jonah in this belly of his own making, of this place where we think we know better than God. Once we're the chosen people, or we've said yes to Jesus, and we do this little flitting thing of we wave away the request that he's asked us, or even commanded as followers of Christ to do. Oh no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. What are we, stupid? Mm-hmm. I'm so guilty of the things that Jonah has done. But he prays this just incredibly beautiful prayer, which is so ironic because that's the first thing you would do is write a poem in the belly of a fish. No, it's not. But he cried out to the Lord in my great trouble. He answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, or Sheol, which is a graveyard. Lord, you heard me, threw me into the ocean depths. Now he's blaming God for being thrown into the ocean, even though it was his idea in the first place to be thrown into the ocean. And the guys did it. But now he's blaming God for it. But Lord, you've driven me from your presence, yet I will look once more toward your holy temple. I do love the thought that even though it did not go the way he'd hoped, instead of rejecting God and saying, how could a good God, it turns him towards the mountains. Sure. It turns him towards the temple. oh Lord, that my knee-jerk response will be what Jonah's was in that moment, to look to him and to not be upset even more. And we've heard it said that trouble can either grow a relationship with the Lord or weaken it. And so he prays this beautiful prayer, and then there is a word in Hebrew for vomit, and it is ka. And that is a great word. It is ka. And so the whale ka out Jonah, and he vomited him on the beach, and he goes to Nineveh. And we kind of see some satire here with the area of Nineveh. It certainly was a giant area. This was a very big city. I think it was like 7 miles around or something, the circumference.
Yeah.
So it was a big place, but he talks about like walking through Nineveh, and it's like it takes days to do it. And that's silly. That'd be kind of like us going, oh, it took forever.
Sure.
Because
an exaggeration.
It wouldn't take necessarily days, but people be like, oh man, doesn't it? I remember kind of walking around that area. It was forever. It was only, a few hours. He goes into Nineveh. Interestingly, we don't have a king's name. Why wouldn't you share it? And every other book of the prophets are very exact with the king's names, which is the king of Nineveh. He doesn't even actually, I take that back. He doesn't go to the king. He just kind of like goes into the city. He walks a distance, and then he gives the 5-word sermon. And this is what it says. 40 days from now, Nineveh will be destroyed.
See you later.
That's it. That's it. He doesn't say why. He doesn't say how. He doesn't say who's mad at him. Maybe the Hebrew accent gave it away. I don't know. But that's all he said. And this is what's crazy. Like, you walk into a group of hard extremist Muslim terrorists who believe that, killing people is the right way to go, and you give that sermon. Imagine them going, the people believed God's message. Because like all the pastors who put all that time in every Sunday to do these messages, and they're really, really, really intense and good, and probably, 40 minutes maybe. And this one, 40 days from now, Nineveh will be destroyed. Now that's 8 words in our language, but it was literally 5 in Hebrew. That's it. And the people believed, and from the greatest to the least, they declared a fast. They put on burlap to show their sorrow. What's really funny here is when the king heard that Jonah was saying this, he steps down from his throne. He immediately starts becoming this man of faith, because I feel like people should know. We do have an inner sense of right and wrong because God has equipped us with this, and he continues to speak into our knowledge about what is right and wrong through his word, through, those. Well, you have those conversations with people maybe who aren't believers in anything. Well, how do you know right from wrong? And you could talk for days about that. Doesn't make any sense. If you don't believe in a value, then how do you set one? That doesn't make sense. So they knew that they had done wrong because they were immediately convicted.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And the king did this thing. He also made the animals do it. That's the funny thing. So the cows also are not going to be able to eat. And also they will wear sackcloth. So I don't know of any other place where I've read about animals wearing sackcloth. I know of accounts where God has allowed the animals to be taken out, like in 1 Samuel. Saul, you're to take out everybody. Nothing should live.
Right.
Right? But wearing sackcloth. So again, we're kind of like, this feels like a fun way of basically holding up the mirror in front of the faces of the chosen people, saying, how have you been like this? We've kind of shared this in a past podcast, when you are less Christian than the non-Christian. Wait, how is that even possible?
Less Christian than non-Christian. Yeah, right.
So they go with their mourning process. When God saw what they had done, and he saw that they were sincere, they put a stop to their evil ways. He changed his mind and did not carry out the destruction that he had threatened. What John 3:16 is for the New Testament, maybe the statement we hear a dozen or so times in the Old Testament, is that God is a God of mercy. It's his description of himself to Moses. He's full of love. He's full of compassion, always merciful, He wants to be merciful to his people. Sometimes we get into our heads that, oh, he's just mine. No, he's for everyone. He loves everyone. He even shares in other prophets' books. Yes, the destruction of Judah and Israel will bring wrath upon the places who sneered their noses and didn't do anything to help him. But he will also remember them too. He's a God of mercy. Jonah just gets angry about it. He's like, I knew you were going to do this. I knew you were going to do it. And you did. This change of plans, it greatly upset Jonah because what he's done, he's set up shop outside the city and he's basically waiting to see it be destroyed. And he doesn't have any popcorn, but I can envision that, right? Just he's loafing it, set up a little shelter. He expects to be there for a minute. It's hot out there. He's got a lovely little tree that grew. God caused it to grow, it says. And didn't I say before I left home that you would do this, Lord? That's why I ran to Tarshish. I knew you were going to be merciful and compassionate, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love. You're eager to turn back from destroying people. Just kill me now, Lord. Just kill me now. And God's like, is it right for you to be angry about this? Jonah went out to the east side of the city, has this shelter, got arranged. He made several arrangements. He arranged for the big storm. He arranged for the big whale or big fish. He arranged now for the whale to spit out Jonah and now to have this tree. It's been arrangements.
Yeah.
Angels have been busy probably. Proclamations have been delivered and things have been said. And he sits under this tree and it's a little leafy plant and it's grown there and it's shading him. And then God arranged for a worm. It's a little bit lesser in scale than a great fish. And you know what happens to the plant. The worm eats it. And then this causes another anger moment. There's one little relief in here. Jonah was very grateful for the plant. This is the first time we've ever heard anything positive
about him at all.
Yeah. It's like, Jonah loved this plant. Oh, it's a good plant. That's pretty.
Sounds like a coworker that is retiring.
Yeah.
And he was the biggest grump and you don't know what to say about him at his party.
But he loved that plant.
He loved that plant. What would we do without Bill's watering of the plant, guys?
See?
Yeah.
It kept the office oxygenated.
Thank you, Bill.
And it received our carbon monoxide. Anyway. So he got mad, though, when the plant was destroyed by the worm that God had arranged for. And the next morning at dawn, he's like, what? Death is certainly better than living like this, he exclaimed. A people of passion, a people of expression. Jonah's people right here, right? I should just die or I'm going to die. And God said to Jonah, okay, is it right for you to be angry because the plant died? It's kind of the same question that he asked earlier, but this time he's replacing people with plant. Yes. You see the difference? It's like, it's okay for you to be angry about the plant's death, but yet you're feeling nothing for the 120,000 people living in spiritual decay, not to mention all the animals, God says, which I loved hearing the pastor share on this because it just made me laugh out loud. It's like they wore sackcloth for crying out loud. The cows wore sackcloth for crying out loud. You're mad because a plant has passed, one that I caused to grow. Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a city? And that's the end of Jonah. And listening to further commentary on these types of stories that you've heard your whole life through a lens that maybe you're not familiar with, because I certainly read that book as a child with the pictures. I still remember the little book my parents read to me. A lot of the times they don't even include that last part. And then the city of Nineveh was saved. It's a story of redemption. Actually, it's a story about our hypocrisy. It's a story about how we want to give grace until we don't. As long as it fits into my box and my plans and in my mind, this is how grace should work for me. And yet Jesus gave everybody a seat at the table. Everybody. In fact, Jesus references Jonah, interestingly enough, and there's this rebirthing opportunity in the ground 3 days, or in the belly of the whale 3 days and rising up. What will I do with this reprise, with this opportunity in front of me? Will I be like what Jesus was and is, bread, life, all the things that encourage and nurture? Or will I be just bitter and angry Grouchy Bill with the plant.
My son asked, we were leaving church, and he said, well, we got that big cross onto church. He's almost 5. And I said, well, we want to tell people what we believe and let them know that they're welcome to, come join us as well. That Jesus took away our sins on the cross.
Yeah.
And it really does get to that. It's just real easy when somebody stumbles in and says, I want to change. And you're like, yeah, I don't care what you've done. You really mean it. The church, I'm just speaking generally, right? I don't care. Yeah. Kiss that old life goodbye. Literally doesn't matter what you've done. But there's this, what about people? Because my son said, I said, anybody can join us. And he was like, but not bad guys. And I said, well, of course I had to make a distinction. I said, anybody's welcome in new life. I said, no, bad guys are not allowed to come in and do bad guy things.
Yeah. There are rules.
There's rules. Yeah.
There's rules.
But when it comes to, that's why it's so messy, what about somebody that has an addiction and it's going to continue for a couple of years or the rest of their life? What about somebody that is borderline narcissist, anger problem, something like that's going to flare up? And that may not be a new person. That may be somebody that's been there from day one. They lead the Sunday school, but man, you go on the church mission trip with them and they drive you stinking crazy.
Yeah.
And it gets to, it's so easy when you haven't been affected by it and you don't care what bad they've done. Jesus is for all. It's very easy to say, but when it affects you,
absolutely, and
it continues to, because even if they are a believer, and it's like, I can't stand that guy.
Yeah, Tim Mackey gave that incredible analogy of the guy who gets mad in traffic until he's the one who gets caught doing the bad traffic thing. Because, but the rules are there for the other people and not for me. We do that thing.
There's an exception for me.
There's an exception
for everything.
Well, and maybe my sin hasn't stacked up as bad as their sin in my mind, in culture and society's mind. And clearly, obviously, there are levels of sin, degrees of sin, right?
Murder is more serious than stealing a pencil, right?
But it is the same kind of sin. It's you can't be just a little bit ripe. You're either a ripe banana or you're not, right? You just are or you're not. If you have sin in your life, regardless of the degree, it's sin.
Yep.
And it has to go away. How do you get it to go away? Well, you don't. That's a Jesus thing. That's a receiving thing. He did it for us. He does that for me. And now he's required as a follower of Christ for me to joy it when I see my enemy receive grace. And there's this story that was about this gentleman. I guess it was back in 87, the IRA in Ireland. I was sharing this with you this morning. And I actually forgot the guy's name now. But it was that unbelievable story of forgiveness where the IRA, if you don't know, especially in the mid to late 80s, there was this really big upset happening between Britain and Ireland and just them wanting to have control and take it back from Great Britain. It was just a big mess. So there was the group called the IRA, and they would go around and they would use weaponry to try to make their statement, saying, you need to leave us alone, and they would do bombings and things like that. And there was this gentleman who was at a gathering. It was in honor of the fallen heroes of World War II. And there he was in the city, and an IRA bomb, they planned on it, and it went off, and he and his daughter were trapped in rubble for quite a while. And while they were trapped, he was hearing encouragement from her and back and forth from him. And the last words she said to him before passing was, "I love you, Daddy." And when he was removed from the rubble and he was able to speak again, he said, "I choose not to be bitter, to live in that pain. I choose to pray for each of these people who have done this to us every single day, that they will be loved, that they will be forgiven." And I was like, first of all, when I heard that, it's an incredible way to share Christ, because that went viral back in the days when that didn't exist. People were like, what? And I think we get to this place of like looking at Old Testament values and saying, I get that, but God came and redeemed things through Christ. And now he's trying to bring us to this new level. So maybe they have like a new level of expectation of what is allowed or not allowed in forgiveness terms. It's like, no, those people, because Jesus is here and he's shown them the way and they've chosen to go the opposite, they've chosen their path and they're not worthy of forgiveness now. I think maybe that's where people might go. Because otherwise it's like what you're saying is completely the opposite of what Jesus teaches and what he did for us on the cross. There's no exception to this post-cross.
Mm-hmm. There are just things that people won't, if it's harming somebody to a certain degree, at least you read social media comments, it's just not going to be forgiven. You're a blank, whatever it is, for the rest of your life, and you should rot in jail and rot in hell. I mean, is what a lot of people, and I think that's
we don't even know what we're saying when we say that too.
Exactly, and so we have to be able to extend the forgiveness that Jesus did, consistently. Not that it's easy, but good to percolate. Until next week, thank you. This is the Anything But Quiet Time podcast, and we will see you then.